My husband, Fu Jingchen, had been missing for 5 years. Now he was kneeling at the hospital entrance with his mistress Bai Wei, begging me to get tested as a bone marrow match for their son. What they didn't know was that I was the head of the hematology department at this very hospital. What they really didn't know was how I'd survived the past 5 years. Jianjin, after he cleaned out every penny we had and left me with a paralyzed mother, Jian-in Dan Lar. From that day on, I personally handed them their death sentence. That afternoon, I had just walked out of the sterile ward when the head nurse came jogging after me. Dr. Shen, there's a family member at the entrance making a scene, demanding to see someone who can save his son. He's extremely agitated. I pulled off my mask and glanced toward the main lobby. One glance was all it took. Fu Jingchen. 5 years since I'd last seen him. His suit was decent enough, but anxiety was etched into every line around his eyes. Beside him, Bai Wei wept prettily, cradling a small boy whose skin was the color of old wax. My steps faltered for a moment, but my heart was strangely calm. 10 years ago, he'd taken Bai Wei and run off with every last cent of our savings, abandoning me and his stroked and paralyzed mother in a rented apartment. 5 years ago, he vanished completely. Jianjin even changed his registered address. I'd started as a caregiver, looking after his mother while burning the midnight oil to study and earn my certifications. Eventually, I put on this white coat, and now he'd walk right through my door. I stood in the corridor for a few seconds without moving. The morning he left 10 years ago, I thought he'd gone out to buy breakfast. By noon, I discovered the closet was empty, the bank account drained, and even the envelope with 3,000 yuan in emergency cash at his mother's bedside had been snatched away. I called him 17 times. Not one went through. After that day, I never cried over him again. Not because it didn't hurt, because there was no time. His mother's heart monitor was still beeping, and I had to go pay the hospital bill first. When I walked over, he didn't recognize me at all. He stared at the ID badge on my chest and blurted out, "You're the department head." Perfect. I've heard there's someone in your blood type database who's a near gel-tint perfect match for my son. Bring them out, name your price. I looked at him. The hospital has no authority to disclose information from the matching registry. Bai Wei immediately wiped her tears. Doctor, he's only 8 years old. Acute leukemia. He's already been through 3 rounds of chemo. If we wait any longer, he'll die. You can't just stand by and watch. My tone was flat. Saving lives follows a process. Bone marrow registry queue. Family members get priority matching. Donor gives voluntary consent. Skip a single step and it doesn't happen. Fu Jingchen grew frantic. He stepped forward and lowered his voice. Don't give me that official runaround. I've already done my homework. Jinjin, that person registered their blood type right here in this hospital. The data is in your hands. Just set up a meeting. I'll give you 500,000. I looked up at him. That's bribery. The hospital has security cameras. His face froze, then twisted with humiliation and rage. You're just some department head putting on airs. If anything happens to my son, I'll make sure this hospital pays for it. People around us started staring. Who does this guy think he is? Begging for help with that attitude? The kid is pitiful, but you can't force a doctor to break the law. I looked at him and actually smiled. Sir, please calm down. First, no one has the right to force another person to donate bone marrow. 2. Second, the hospital cannot share the personal information of anyone who has registered their blood type. Third, if you continue disrupting order, I will have security escort you out. Fu Jingchen clenched his jaw. Just you wait. He turned, supporting Bai Wei as they walked away. As he passed me, he didn't spare me a second glance. Good. He'd clearly forgotten what that woman looked like. Jian, the one he'd abandoned in a rented apartment. The one who'd knelt and begged him to leave his mother a little money for medicine. I watched their retreating figures, my fingertips slowly curling tight. This time, it was my turn to say no. The next morning, Bai Wei came alone. She was dressed head to toe in designer labels, carrying a fruit basket and a gift box. Her red, gem-rimmed eyes made her look the picture of helpless beauty. A nurse was about to stop her, but I waved her through. She sat across from me in my office and pushed the gift box forward. Dr. Jingshan was too anxious yesterday. He spoke out of line. I'm here to apologize on his behalf. I didn't touch the box. Say what you came to say. She pressed her lips together, her voice trembling. We found out that the person whose blood type is closest to our son's is a woman, around 30, Gen 5, who had a caregiver physical at this hospital about 10 years ago. Jian, her records are still on file. Doctor, please help us. The child is truly innocent. I stared at her. She was still the same as back then. Jin, always the first to put the word innocent on her lips. Back then, it was also her who'd shown up at my door, belly swollen, telling me she was carrying Fu Jingshan's child and that I should have the decency to step aside. The next day, Fu Jingchen cleaned out the last 280 G8,000 yuan from our account. He didn't even leave me enough for his mother's medication. I asked calmly, what makes you think this person would be willing to see you? Bai Wei's eyes flickered, and she suddenly lowered her voice. Doctor, you're a woman. You must understand. A mother would do anything for her child. Just arrange a meeting with her. She can name her terms. A house, a car, cash, Zhen, whatever she wants. I smiled. And if she refuses? The mask of fragility cracked for just an instant. Then she'd better think carefully. Saving a life is good karma. Standing by while someone dies. Zhen, that invites retribution. I leaned back in my chair. Is that a threat? She immediately teared up again. I didn't mean it that way. I just can't lose my son. I pressed the call button on my desk. When the nurse came in, I said, right in front of Bai Wei, log these gifts and return them according to hospital integrity regulations. From now on, no unrelated family members are to be admitted to my office without an appointment. Bai Wei went pale. You Jian. I looked at her and finally added, slowly and deliberately, also, stop wasting your energy trying to find out who that person is. Secretly digging into someone else's medical records is enough to land you in prison. Bai Wei shot to her feet. How do you know we've been looking? My voice was very quiet. Because you're sloppy. She stared at me wide, gen-eyed, as if seeing me for the first time. Who are you exactly? I didn't answer. I just pushed the return receipt in front of her. Sign it. Take your things. She refused to sign, raising her voice. You doctors are all cold and blooded. My son's life is hanging by a thread, and you're clinging to your precious rules. A crowd quickly gathered outside the door. People whispered, Isn't this the same family from yesterday? Trying to bribe with gifts and acting self-righteous about it? The department head has incredible composure. When Bai Wei saw the growing audience, she cried harder. Please, I'm begging you, help my son. I stood up, walked to the doorway, and spoke clearly enough for the entire floor to hear. This hospital welcomes patients seeking treatment. It does not welcome tantrums. Any bone marrow donation must be built on a foundation of voluntariness, legality, and informed consent. You may ask, but others have the right to refuse. Bai Wei's crying stopped abruptly. She stared at me fixedly, and something seemed to click. The color drained from her face inch by inch. But the next second, she forced a smile. Doctor, I hope you never find yourself needing to beg someone for help. I watched her leave. not a ripple in my eyes. But I knew they wouldn't let it go that easily. They most certainly did not. At noon, the lab called me. Someone had privately approached the blood type archive manager, offering 200,000 yuan to sneak a look at blood type records left by hospital caregivers from 10 years ago. I told them not to spook anyone. 简简. Just preserve the phone recording and security footage. That afternoon, I went straight to hospital administration and the legal department. Dr. Shen, this has already crossed into criminal territory. Jen secretly accessing someone else's medical records and disrupting normal hospital operations. The police can handle this, the legal counsel said after reviewing the materials, his expression grave. I recommend we immediately notify hospital security and issue an internal risk alert. I nodded. Add one more measure. Suspend all non-GIN central access to historical archives. Whoever signs off bears responsibility. The hospital director frowned. Have you checked their background? I placed the printed materials on the table. Fu Jingchen, Tianjin, his company was nothing but an empty shell buried under a mountain of debt. Bai Wei had 2 properties under her name, but both were mortgaged. Their only hope now was finding the person who might be a match. The director read it all and said just one thing. Follow protocol. Same rules for everyone. I acknowledged him but didn't leave. There's one more thing I'd like to report in advance. I handed over an old file that had been gathering dust for years. It was the basic blood type information from a physical I'd undergone 10 years ago when I was registered as a caregiver companion at this hospital. I was the person they'd been talking about. Tian, the one who might match the child. The director paused. It's you, I said calmly. It is. But whether I donate is my decision alone. I'm telling the hospital now to prevent them from escalating this and dragging the hospital into the mess. Legal immediately followed up. Understood. Our official stance will be no one's blood type information can be disclosed without authorization. To P-Lane, whether to donate is entirely up to the individual. No one is permitted to coerce anyone. I nodded, then texted the lawyer I regularly worked with. She called back quickly. If your ex-Jin husband publicly harasses you online, spreads your private information, or slanders you, all of it can be documented as evidence, especially if he fabricates family relationships or forges expedited medical paperwork. Jinten, that's even more serious. I said flatly, he absolutely will. The lawyer chuckled, then let him dig his own grave. Before leaving work that evening, I made one more stop at the inpatient ward. Outside the room, I looked through the glass at the child. 8 years old, head shaved, tubes running from his body, eyes empty. The child was indeed innocent, but innocence was never meant to be a blade his parents could hold to someone else's throat. I was turning to leave when Fu Xing came charging out of the elevator. Dr. Shen! He blocked my path, breathing hard. I just heard Jian, the person with the matching blood type, has already been found internally, hasn't it? All you need to do is schedule one more test. I looked at him. Who told you that? He didn't answer. Just spoke through gritted teeth. My son can't wait. That's still not an excuse to break the law. Fu Jingzhen stared at me, then suddenly sneered. Fine. You won't help? Then don't blame me for making this public. I refuse to believe that in this day and age, no one can deal with a doctor who stands by and lets a child die. I looked at him and spoke slowly. Mr. Fu, a word of advice. When you're begging for help, you should look like someone who's begging. Don't end up failing to save the child and landing yourself behind bars instead. His expression shifted. I didn't linger. I walked away. This round, I was waiting for him to make the first move. On the third day, Fu Jingchen and Bai Wei brought people to cause a scene. At 10 in the morning, a crowd suddenly packed the entrance to the hematology department. Two social media influencers held up their phones, filming and shouting, "Everyone, look at this! This is the City People's Hospital." Jen said they have a match, but they're watching this child die. Bai Wei sat sobbing beside a wheelchair, holding her son. Fu Jingshen faced the cameras with a look of righteous grief. Our child has acute leukemia. The only person who might be a match is right here inside this hospital, but the administration is refusing to make contact, Jinjen all to protect So Jen called privacy. Is an 8-year Jen sold child's life really worth less than a cold, heartless regulation? The live stream chat exploded. This hospital has zero humanity. Saving one life is better than building a 7-gem-story pagoda. Expose the matching person. Free. Refusing to donate is basically murder. The nurse's station was completely blocked. Security moved in to maintain order, but Fu Jingjin suddenly raised his voice. "Don't touch my son. We're not leaving until we get an explanation." When I stepped out of my office, every camera turned to me. Bai Wei rushed over and dropped to her knees with a thud. "Dr. Shen, I'm begging you. Just let that person come out and see us. If she'll save my son, I'll kowtow to her." She actually smashed her forehead against the floor, and it turned red immediately. The crowd erupted. "Oh my God, that's heartbreaking. Is this doctor really going to refuse?" Fu Jingjin swooped in smoothly. "Dr. Shen, you're a woman too. When you have children someday, you'll understand how I feel. Hiding behind your rules like this. Din, aren't you just trying to force us to accept our fate?" I stood there watching him perform with practiced ease. 10 years ago, he'd done the same thing. In front of all our relatives, he said I was unreasonable, that I'd pushed him too hard, that I'd driven him to it. I raised my hand, signaling the live stream cameras to stop swaying. "Since you want an explanation, I'll give you one right now." The room fell silent for a beat. My voice wasn't loud, but every word landed solid and steady. First, the identity of the person whose blood type is similar to the child's is their private information, and the hospital cannot simply reveal it. Second, bone marrow donation is entirely voluntary. No one can use morality, public pressure, money, or threats to coerce anyone. Third, your live stream today has already disrupted normal hospital operations. Fu Genshin fired back immediately. "Stop hiding behind regulations. At the end of the day, you're just cold, din-blooded." I looked at him and suddenly smiled. "You really want to talk about human decency?" He faltered. In front of everyone, I slowly spoke his name. "Fu Jingjin, 10 years ago, when you cleaned out every last cent of our savings and abandoned your sick mother and your wife, Jingjin, where was your human decency then?" His face went white as a sheet. Bai Wei's head snapped up. "You!" The crowd erupted. "What's going on? This guy ditched his family?" "This is huge." I kept my eyes locked on Fu Jingchen. "You keep saying the child is innocent, that you're just a desperate father with nowhere to turn. But what you've been hiding is that the person you're begging, Dentiant, is the ex-Jane wife you ruined." The live stream chat flipped instantly. "Wait, what? His ex-Dian wife? What kind of twist is this?" "He's not begging his ex-Dian wife, is he? And he has the nerve to cause a scene." Fu Jingshen stumbled back a step, staring at me. "Shen, Ji?" I unclipped the reflective cover from my badge and let him read the name. Sheng Ji, head of hematology. Bai Wei looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Impossible. How can you be here?" I said flatly, "You came to this hospital with a live stream crew to put on a show. Why? Why can't I stand right here and tell everyone myself? I am the person you've been trying to force onto the operating table. The entire corridor went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The next second, Fu Xingchen lost it completely. "You did this on purpose!" He lunged at me, trying to grab me. "You recognized me from the start. You deliberately watched my son die." Security pinned him down immediately. Bai Wei threw herself at the cameras, wailing, "Everyone, did you see that?" She could save him, but she's choosing not to. This is revenge. She's using a child to get revenge on us. The chat erupted again. Even if she's the ex-Dian wife, the child is still innocent. "Take revenge on the adults if you want, but not the kid." That's so cruel. I didn't rush to argue back. I simply took the megaphone from the nurse's hand. "If you're willing to listen today, then let me finish what I never got to say 10 years ago." I looked at the cameras and at the crowd. 10 years ago, Fu Jingchen had an affair with Bai Wei. When my mother Jin-Law had a stroke and became paralyzed, the hospital bills, rehab costs, caregiver fees, Jianjin, I shouldered all of it alone. He kept saying he was going out to borrow money. Instead, he took Bai Wei and ran off with every cent we had. Bank accounts emptied. He didn't even leave enough for his mother's emergency treatment the next day. I paused. That night, I knelt outside the payment window, calling every relative I had, begging to borrow money. When my mother Jin-Law woke up, the first thing she said was to tell me to divorce him. She said her son was no good. Those last few years of her life, Jin, I saw her through to the end. Alone. Crowd fell silent. People were already cursing. Is this even human? He dumped his own mother and his wife? An older man pushed his way to the front, his voice shaking. "I used to be a caregiver myself. That job isn't meant for humans." Jian bare-handed sponge, baths in the dead of winter, turning a patient 7 or 8 times a night, 3 hours of sleep if you're lucky. He looked at my hands, then at the faint yellowish tinge that hadn't fully faded from my face, and his throat choked up. He couldn't say any more. A young woman nearby started crying. She sold her own blood. She carried 800,000 in debt, all by herself. That's just too much suffering. The livestream chat changed direction, comments flooding upward. How did she survive those 10 years? He even took the emergency cash before he ran? That's not something a human being does. Stay strong, Dr. Ray, I continued. I started as a caregiver, at night shifts, turning patients, sponge baths, bedside vigils. I did it all. Then I studied for my nursing license, my medical license, went to grad school, did advanced training, and worked my way up to where I am today. Not because I was waiting for someone to come back, because I needed to stand on my own feet. Fu Jingchen, pinned by security, was ashen gen-faced. Quit playing the victim. That's all ancient history. I looked at him. Ancient history? Then why, the moment you heard the matching person might be me, did you try to use a live stream to force me to donate? Bai Wei cried out, "But you're the child's only hope." My voice turned cold. Wrong. I'm not the hope. The hope was for you to follow the rules early on, pursue proper treatment, and go through legal channels to register with the bone marrow bank. Dant, instead of trying to use connections, bribes, and online mobs to target one specific person who you'd already destroyed. Just then, the legal team and hospital security arrived. The legal counsel read the official hospital statement aloud. Under the law, bone marrow donation is entirely voluntary, and no one may compel it. The hospital will not disclose the identity of the individual in question to anyone, nor will it cooperate with any threats or coercion. This family has attempted to bribe hospital staff and gain unauthorized access to medical files. Evidence has been preserved, and we reserve the right to pursue legal action. The room erupted. The live stream chat shifted complete. They tried to bribe staff too. This isn't a rescue mission. It's kidnapping. Support Dr. Shane's rights. Nobody has the right to force bone marrow donation. Fu Jingchen finally panicked. Don't make things up. We didn't bribe anyone. I signaled a colleague from the lab to play the audio recording. Soon, his voice from the previous night echoed through the corridor. 200,000. Help me pull up the records of that female caregiver from 10 years ago. Just find out who she is. Jinjin, I'll take it from there. Bu Jingjin's face turned white as paper. Bai Wei shrieked. Turn it off! Turn it off! I looked at them, my voice steady to the point of cruelty. Now? Jian, do you still want to keep the live stream going? Of course they weren't willing to give up. That afternoon, Fu Jingjin produced a family member application for matching, form from Who Jane Knows Jane Where, and stormed into the administration office with Bai Wei, claiming the child was technically a quasi-Jane legal relative of mine and demanding the hospital open a special channel to compel me to undergo further blood type testing. When I saw that form, I nearly laughed out loud. The stamp was fake, the procedure number was fabricated, and even the hospital letterhead font was wrong. In the administration conference room, Fu Jingchain slammed the table and shouted, Shen Ji was my wife. My son is practically a child she helped raise. She has an obligation to cooperate with treatment. Legal laid the actual law right in front of him. Once you're divorced, you're no longer family. There is no law requiring an ex-Jian wife to donate bone marrow to her ex-Jian husband's child. Topic. Furthermore, bone marrow donation is a matter of bodily autonomy. No one has the right to compel it. Fu Jingjin's expression was ugly. Then I'll sue. I'll let a judge order her to cooperate. My lawyer had just arrived, and she cut in coldly, Go ahead and sue. Then wait for the court to throw it out. There is not a single law in this country that can force a person to donate bone marrow. On the other hand, you forged a hospital seal and fabricated procedure numbers. I'd worry about whether the police will be coming for you first. Bai Wei panicked immediately and lunged for the form. We didn't make this. Someone else did it for us. I looked up at her. Who? She stammered and couldn't produce an answer. Security played another surveillance clip. In the footage, Bai Wei was secretly slipping a red envelope to an intern in the matching room, whispering, Just let me see the list. It won't get you in trouble. The intern had turned in the money on the spot. The conference room fell dead silent. At that point, even the few hospital staff who'd felt some sympathy for them couldn't take it anymore. Disgusting! The kid is pitiful, but having parents like this is even more pitiful. First, they forge documents, then they guilt-trip everyone, and now they want to force the department head onto an operating table? Soon, recordings of the live stream were posted all over the internet. Each headline hit harder than the last. Pound ex-husband brings im Stressfor Sexwifitonine. Pound bribery fails at hospital blames doctor. Pound can bone marrow donation beforced. The comments were almost unanimously one-sided. Donation should always be voluntary. Jian, is this even a debate? The ex-Gent wife didn't even pursue him for stealing their money. That's already more than generous. Support Dr. Shen. Doctors are people too, not tools. Someone needs to investigate the forgery and the unauthorized file access. That evening, the police came to take statements at the hospital. Fu Jingjin tried to argue. I was just desperate to save my son. The officer, taking the statement, didn't even look up. Desperation doesn't give you a free pass to break the law. Bribery, forgery, disturbing public order. Each charge will be assessed separately. After signing my statement, I turned to leave. Fu Jingjin suddenly called after me. Shenji, I'm begging you. Just do the extended matching test, okay? I'll make up for everything. I stopped and looked back at him. Make up for it? With what? The 280,000 you stole? Or the apology your mother never received before she died? His mouth opened and closed. He couldn't produce a single word. I turned away. Too late. 3 days later, the results came in. After a joint review by the National Bone Marrow Registry and our hospital, across the entire country, there was only one historical record that came close to matching the child's blood type for further detailed testing. That record was mine. In other words, through official channels, I was their last option. When the news came out, Fu Jingchen fell apart completely. He didn't dare cause another scene at the hospital. Instead, he waited for me in the underground parking garage after work. When he saw me, he dropped to his knees with a thud. Gee, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. It was the first time in 10 years he'd called me by my name like that. I was a scumbag back then. I wasn't human. But the child is truly innocent. Zhenjian, he's so small. Consider it building good karma. Just save him this once. I'll kowtow to you. I'll be your servant for life. Bai Wei knelt too, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Shenji. I admit it. Jianjian, what I did back then was shameless. Hit me, curse me, I don't care. But please, don't let a child pay for our sins. People coming and going through the parking garage all stopped. Some filmed on their phones. Others whispered. Here we go, again. Isn't this just cornering her? I stood there looking down at them. A long time ago, I'd knelt like that too. Knelt outside a hospital room, begging Fu Jingchen to wire back some of the money he'd taken. Back then, he'd said over the phone, Shenji, you need to accept your fate. Stop clinging to me. Now, the wheel had turned. I spoke slowly. Fu Jingchen, do you know what the hospital's ethics committee told me? He lifted his head, eyes streaked with red. I said they told me that whether I donate is entirely my own decision. Even if I refuse, the hospital will respect and protect that decision. Because bone marrow donation cannot be built on a foundation of harm, threats, and Esperdamlesa and ordaintion of harm, threats, and moral coercion. Fu Jingchen's face turned ashen. So, you truly won't save him at all? I looked at him. It's not that I won't, it's that I have no obligation to endure bone marrow aspiration needles, mobilization injections, to lie on an operating table for harvesting, and to bear all the post and surgical recovery risks, Jinjin, plus the endless harassment from you two going forward. Bai Wei cried until she nearly fainted. But it's a human life. I nodded. Yes, a human life. Which is exactly why you should have learned to take responsibility for your own choices much sooner, instead of waiting until you've burned every bridge and then coming back to force the person you destroyed to sacrifice herself. Fu Jingchen tried to lunge at me again but was blocked by security. He completely broke down, screaming at me. Shenji, you'll regret this. Get what's coming to you. I looked at him, my gaze cold and unwavering. Karma? You abandoned your sick mother, stole the family savings, and fled, cheated, and started a new family, bribed officials, forged documents, launched an online mob, and tried to force a donation. The karma you're talking about? It's already found you. I took a document from my bag and handed it to him. It was a copy of the lawsuit my lawyer had drafted. To recover the money he'd stolen, to seek damages for years of emotional distress, and to sue them for defaming me and illegally accessing my records. I said calmly, also, you should know that the police have opened a case regarding your forged documents and attempted unauthorized access to medical records. Don't come to the hospital looking for me again, otherwise I'll apply for a restraining order. Fu Jingjian's hand trembled and the papers scattered across the ground. I took one last look at them. My answer will always be the same 2 words. I refuse. A month later, the legal case against Fu Jingchen and Bai Wei reached its conclusion. Fu Jingchen was detained by police for forgery, causing a public disturbance at the hospital, and attempting to illegally access someone's private medical records. Charges were formally filed. Bai Wei was also penalized for bribery, spreading rumors online, and infringing on another person's reputation. The last remaining property under their names was frozen due to deaths and reparations. As for the child, no new suitable match was ever found. He could only continue with conservative treatment. The day the news reached me, I was doing rounds. I was silent for a long time. In the end, I simply asked the nurse to settle the newly admitted pediatric patient according to standard procedure. The child was innocent, but I was not a sacrifice. Eventually, the online chatter about the whole debacle faded. More people began sharing information about the principle of voluntary bone marrow donation, discussing the boundaries of doctor privacy protection and medical order. The hospital even used the case as a teaching example for a system. In wide legal training session. The head nurse told me quietly, "Dr. Shen, you've become quite famous among the younger doctors. Everyone says you've turned 'doctors are people too' from a slogan into a way of life." I smiled but didn't respond. As I left work, I passed through the main lobby. The electronic display was scrolling through the list of top GINT performing departments. Hematology was listed first. My name was at the very top. Sunlight poured through the glass curtain wall, blindingly bright. I suddenly remembered that winter night 10 years ago. The payment window was ice, Jen cold. My mother, Jen In, Jen Log, gripped my hand and said, "Gee, stop waiting for him. You need to live your own life." I did. Now I have a respectable career, a stable income, a home, and a car that I bought myself. Nine Hens trust me, colleagues respect me, and the young residents at the hospital all address me properly as Dr. Shen. As for Fu Jing Chen, I heard that after his release, he went around begging for money. Jen groveling just like I used to, hitting walls at every turn. Bai Wei's livestream account was reported and banned. All she could do was collapse and cry in a rented apartment. As for me, I will never look back at them again. A new intern looked at me and asked, "Dr. Shen, do you truly have no regrets?" I flipped through a patient's chart. My voice calm. I save the people I should save and do what needs to be done. As for sins that aren't mine, Din, it's not my place to atone for them. With that, I closed the chart and pushed open the door to the ward. Inside were new patients, new battles, new hope. As for the man kneeling at the hospital entrance, crying and begging me to get tested, Tianjin. From the moment he turned his back 10 years ago, he lost any right to my forgiveness. Permanently.